Why are you suddenly so distant?" she asked after weeks of mixed signals and half-effort communication. I simply mirrored what I was given. Now that she feels the same uncertainty I did, she wants clarity I already learned to live without. "You've been so cold lately. What happened to you?" I just looked at her. Not because I didn't have an answer, because the answer was her. And I didn't know how to say that without it sounding like the kind of thing you can't take back once it's out in the room. She was standing in the kitchen, holding a mug with both hands. That specific way she always held mugs when she needed something warm to grip. The light was doing that soft, golden, late afternoon thing where everything looks like the establishing shot of a film you've already watched the ending of. I looked at her standing there and thought, we're not in that film anymore. We hadn't been for a long time. She was only just starting to notice. "I'm not cold," I said. "I've just been tired." She nodded. Slow, deliberate. The way she nodded when she'd made the private decision to file something away rather than deal with it in the moment. What she didn't know, what I hadn't told her, was that I had learned that nod from her. From watching her use it on me for the better part of a year. I didn't fully understand that yet, standing there in the kitchen light with my chest quieter than it used to be. But that moment was a turning point. Not because of what was said, because of what I realized I was no longer feeling. You don't always recognize important moments when you're inside them. The conversations that rearrange your interior don't always announce themselves. They arrive dressed like ordinary Tuesdays. A question you answer without really answering. A pause that sits half a second too long. A nod that costs you nothing to give but lands in someone else like a verdict. I was 26. I'll call her Ren. It's not her real name, but she had a quality like that, precise and light, and somehow always perched slightly out of reach, was 24. We'd been together for 2 years, lived in a third-floor apartment in a building where the elevator had a complicated relationship with reliability, and the neighbors below cooked something that smelled incredible every night around 10. We used to theorize about what it was. Sitting on the couch, TV on low, me suggesting it was some kind of slow-cooked lamb situation, her insisting confidently it was a fish curry, neither of us ever actually asking. That's such a small thing. But that's the texture of it. The shared jokes. The private bits. The language two people build when they've been close long enough. We had all of that. And what I'd learned, slowly and uncomfortably, over the year leading up to that kitchen moment, was that we also had an imbalance I'd been quietly carrying for almost the entire time. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. 2 years is long enough to stop performing. Long enough for someone's actual patterns to emerge from underneath the version they put forward when everything is new. Ren was warm. I want to say that clearly before I say anything else. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't deliberately indifferent. She wasn't, at any point, running some kind of long con. She was genuinely warm. Funny in a way that was always slightly unexpected, the kind of humor that landed sideways. Sharp in the specific way that comes from paying close attention to the world rather than from having read all the right books, though she'd read those too. She was the person that every room leaned toward without deciding to. You'd be at a party and she'd be talking to 2 people, and somehow everyone nearby would have shifted to face her direction without noticing. She had that quality, and she'd chosen me. For a long time, I let that be enough. For a long time, I told myself that the imbalance was temporary. Stress, busy season, life adjusting itself. I was patient, more patient than I should have been, and then one day I ran out. If I had to mark the exact point where things changed, and I've tried, I've mapped it in memory more times than I'd like to admit, I'd say month 7. Before that, things were good. Not a romantic comedy. Not perfect, but there was a consistency that felt like choosing. Every day, choosing to show up. She'd text back fast, even when she was buried. She remembered things. The Thai restaurant where I always ordered the same dish because I was committed to that particular comfort. The name of the coworker who'd been making my life quietly miserable for months. The bar where my dad had proposed to my mom, which I'd mentioned once, in passing, on a long drive in the early months. She brought it up weeks later. Dropped it into a completely different conversation like it had been sitting in her pocket waiting. And I'd thought, this is someone who actually keeps you. This is someone who pays attention because she wants to, not because she's trying to. I was right. She had been that person. The problem with people is that they aren't fixed. And somewhere between month 6 and month 16, the version of her that paid attention became a version that was still in the relationship the way you're still in a meeting when your mind's already somewhere else. Present in body, partially absent everywhere else. The text got slower first. An hour. 2 hours. Half a day. Sorry, crazy afternoon. Arriving at 9 p.m. in response to something I'd sent at noon. Fine, I told myself. People get buried. It happens. But then the content changed too. The substance went out of them. Messages that used to feel like she was actually there, like there was a person on the other end who'd read what I wrote and formed a real response, got replaced with something that was shaped like a response, but wasn't really one. Haha, yeah. That sucks. Sounds good. I'd send something I was genuinely excited about and get a thumbs up. I'd share something that had actually gotten under my skin and get, oh no, and then silence. And I'd read that and feel something I didn't have a clean word for. Not angry. Not sad exactly. Something more like hollow. The feeling of reaching towards something and closing your hand around air. I went back through old messages trying to find what I'd done wrong, looking for the sentence where I'd turned her off. I couldn't find it, because it wasn't something I'd done. It was something she'd stopped doing. Month 8 I brought it up. Carefully. Not a confrontation. That wasn't what I was after. Just, over dinner one night, I said I'd been feeling a little disconnected lately. Like the communication had gotten thinner. She said she'd been under real pressure at work. A project that kept expanding. A manager who redrew expectations constantly. She wasn't sleeping well, and it was affecting everything. I said I understood. Dropped it. Month 9, same feeling. Didn't bring it up. Told myself I was being too sensitive. Told myself that not every rough patch means something structural. Month 10, the cancellation started. Nothing dramatic about any one of them. I'm exhausted. Can we push dinner to Sunday? Celeste really needs me tonight. She's having a hard time. I stayed too late at work. I'm not fit to be around anyone. Every individual instance completely reasonable. Every instance something I couldn't, in good conscience, argue against. And every time I said fine. Because what are you going to say? You can't argue someone into wanting to be there. You cannot negotiate someone back into choosing you when they've already quietly unchosen you for the evening. Or the week. Or, as I was slowly beginning to understand, the stretch of months I kept telling myself was temporary. So I said fine. And I started noticing. Not keeping score. Noticing is different. Scorekeeping is transactional. Noticing is just paying attention. And when you pay close, consistent attention to someone you love, patterns emerge whether you're looking for them or not. The pattern I was seeing. I was almost always the one reaching first. First texts. Suggested plans. The one asking how she was and following up when the answer was thin. The one carrying the weight of keeping us in contact. I was giving full effort and receiving something that felt like effort's more preoccupied, lower energy cousin. So, gradually, I gave less. Not strategically. Not as a test. Not to teach her anything. Just because it started feeling embarrassing. The specific embarrassment of reaching towards someone and noticing your reach isn't being matched. Like raising your hand for a high five and watching someone look away. After a while, you stop raising your hand quite so fast. Nobody talks about what mirroring feels like from the inside. From the outside, it looks like a game. Like you're running some kind of cold, calculated experiment on someone you claim to care about. From the inside, it feels like the only option left that preserves any self-respect. It feels like you've been carrying something and your arms are tired and you need to put it down for a second. Not forever, just for long enough to breathe. And you want to see if the other person notices the sound it makes when it lands. I wasn't testing her. I was exhausted. There's a version of sustained, one-sided effort that people dress up as unconditional love. What it actually is, most of the time, is self-abandonment wearing a more flattering name. You keep giving without asking for return until you've trained yourself out of needing return. And then one day you look up and realize you've quietly taught yourself to expect almost nothing. And then nothing starts to feel normal. And then nothing starts to feel like what you deserve. I wasn't going to let that become the floor. So I stopped paddling quite as hard. And we drifted a little. And that drift, that slight, barely perceptible pulling back of my effort, was what finally made her feel the weight of the water. There was a week, this was around month 12, where I actually tracked it. Not obsessively. Just, I noticed and I paid attention. Monday, I texted first. Tuesday, I texted first. Wednesday, she sent something, a meme, nothing requiring a response. Thursday, I texted first. Friday, I texted first. Saturday, we were together. Physical presence. Sunday, I texted first. 1 week. 6 days of me initiating contact. 1 day of her sending something that didn't really count as reaching. And I thought, is this what it's been? Has this been the shape of it? I went back further. Not obsessively. I wasn't documenting it. But I looked at the general texture of the last month. The pattern was clear enough. I was doing the majority of the reaching. Not all of it. She wasn't completely absent. But the imbalance was real and consistent. And the question that followed was, what do I do with this? Do I say something? I had said something. Twice, loosely, and gotten reasonable explanations. Do I say it more forcefully? That felt like, I don't know, like arguing for someone to love you the way you need. And that's a specific kind of awful. The feeling of making a case for your own worth. So I didn't. I just stopped reaching quite as far. And waited. Waiting is its own kind of action. People think of it as passive. But sustained, intentional waiting, especially when you're someone who defaults to reaching, is an active choice you have to make again and again. Every time the phone was quiet, and I felt the familiar pull to break the silence with a text, I had to consciously nod. Every time she rescheduled, and I felt the reflex to immediately offer a new time, I had to consciously let the space sit for a while. Every time I wanted to over-explain or over-effort my way through a gap, I had to choose to let the gap be what it was. And that choosing, doing it day after day, was its own kind of exhaustion. Different from the exhaustion of overreaching, but real. The sustained effort of not performing abundance when you don't have it. The sustained effort of allowing the truth of the situation to be visible instead of papering over it. It took something out of me, but it also, slowly, gave something back. What it gave back was a clearer picture of what was actually there. When you stop filling every silence, you get to see what fills in behind you. When you stop compensating for every gap, you get to see the size of the gap. And what I saw, clearly, without drama, was that when I stopped overreaching, the connection didn't automatically find equilibrium. It got quieter, emptier, for a while, and then she noticed, and then she called. And that told me everything the previous 12 months hadn't quite said clearly enough. She had been present when I reached. She had felt the warmth because I was generating it. She hadn't noticed it dimming because I had been generating more to compensate for what she wasn't giving. Until I stopped. Until the light I'd been running on my own power source finally went out enough for the darkness to register. That's not her fault exactly. You don't feel the temperature when someone's working hard to keep you warm. You just feel warm. It's when they stop that you feel the cold. And she felt the cold. And she picked up the phone. It was a Tuesday in November. The kind of day where the sky can't commit to any particular shade of gray. She called me around 7 in the evening. An actual call, not a text. Which already told me something. I almost didn't pick up. Not because I was avoiding her, just because for months the pattern had been me dropping everything the second her name appeared anywhere, and I was, consciously, trying to stop doing that. Trying to stop rewarding unavailability with immediate availability. I picked up after the third ring. Hey. A pause. Are you okay? You've seemed off lately. I almost laughed. Genuinely, almost laughed. I had spent 4 months with a quiet, uncomfortable pressure in my chest, saying absolutely nothing about it. And the week I stopped trying to work around it, she was calling to check on me. I'm fine, I said. Just a long week. You sure? You've been, I don't know, quiet. And there was the word, quiet. Me being quiet was now something worth a phone call. Me giving shorter answers was now noticeable. Me not initiating every conversation was now a change significant enough to address. I held the phone and sat with that for a moment. I'm sure, I said. How are you doing? She hesitated. I feel like something's different with us. Different how? I can't fully explain it. You feel far away. I looked at the ceiling. The water stain above the couch that had been there since the day we moved in. I'd been meaning to get it looked at for 2 years. I've been here, I said quietly. I've been right here the whole time. Which was the truth. I had been there. Every single day. She was the one who had been far. And now that I'd stopped reaching across the distance, she could feel it on her side. I didn't say that, but I thought it. We saw each other that Friday. She'd picked the restaurant. Italian, small, candles burned down to stubs, wine list longer than the menu. She was dressed like she was trying. I noticed that before she even sat down. The particular effort. And across that dinner, she was present in a way she hadn't been in months. Not performing presence, actually inhabiting it. Asking questions and genuinely tracking the answers. Remembering something specific I'd mentioned weeks ago in a text she'd responded to with 2 words, following up on it now in detail. Laughing with her full face, not the polite abbreviated version she'd been giving me for a season. I watched it and felt 2 things simultaneously. Warmth. Real warmth. Because this was her. The specific her I had fallen for. The present, funny, switched on one who made you feel like you were the most interesting thing in her world. This was the person. And right underneath that warmth, something quieter and more careful. Something that was noting all of it. Noting that what had unlocked this version of her was me giving less of myself. And not knowing, yet, what to do with that note. After dinner we walked. Cold enough to see your breath. Quiet streets. She looped her arm through mine and leaned close. I've missed this, she said. This. Just. Us. Like this. Half a block past. We could have had this the whole time, I said. She looked up at me. What do you mean? I mean this wasn't lost. This ease between us. It just wasn't being tended to. She went quiet. A full block this time. Then, I know I've been distracted. I know. Work has been. I know, I said. You've mentioned it. She caught the tone. I felt her register it without flinching. I didn't realize how much I'd checked out, she said. Quieter now. Not until you. She stopped. Until I what? She looked away down the street. Until you stopped trying so hard. There it was. Clean, honest, a little devastating. She knew. Somewhere underneath the day-to-day noise of her life, she had known that the effort wasn't equal. She'd known she was the one coasting. And it had taken me pulling back before she could feel the weight of that. I want to be honest about the full version of this, because the easy version makes me the patient saint and her the careless villain, and that's not what happened. The fuller truth is that I had months, a lot of months, where I could have been clearer, where I could have said, without heat, this isn't working for me. The communication has changed, and it's eroding something, and I need something different. Instead, I had careful half-conversations. I dipped a toe in. She offered a reasonable explanation. I retreated. I told myself I was being mature. I was choosing grace over confrontation. What I was actually doing was absorbing the imbalance instead of naming it, because naming it felt like risking something I wasn't ready to lose. So I absorbed, and absorbed, until there was nothing left to absorb with. And then I pulled back without warning her that was what was happening. She was careless with me. I was indirect with her. Two people, two different kinds of failing. Both of us building the same wall from opposite sides. There's something specific about being the reliable one in a relationship that nobody prepares you for. People talk about it like it's a compliment. You're so steady. You're such a rock. And it is a compliment, in one sense. But in another sense, it means you've become the load-bearing wall. You're the thing that doesn't move. You're the thing people bank on not having to worry about. And load-bearing walls don't get checked on. They don't get maintained the way the more visible parts of a structure do. They just stand there, doing their job, invisibly, until one day there's a hairline crack in the foundation and everyone's surprised. Because walls don't crack. Walls are solid. Except they do, and they aren't. I had been the load-bearing wall for months, taking the weight of our connection because she had, without discussing it, without deciding it, redistributed that weight onto me. And I had held it, because that's what I did, because I was steady, because I was the rock, and because nobody checks on the rock. There was a specific evening around month 11 that I think about sometimes. A Thursday. She was home, which was less guaranteed than it used to be. We were in the living room, and she was on her phone in a way that had gone from occasional to frequent without either of us officially acknowledging it. I said something. I don't remember exactly what, something about my week, something I'd been wanting to share. And she looked up briefly, nodded, said looked back at her phone. I sat there, finished what I was saying. She didn't look up again. And I had this extremely quiet moment of understanding. Not an epiphany, not a dramatic realization, just a quiet, flat, almost boring acknowledgement. She wasn't here. Not really. She was physically present. But the part of her that was interested in what I had to say, that part had left a while ago, and I had been performing as though it was still there. I had been talking to the room, filling the air with words that weren't landing anywhere. And the question that followed, and I remember sitting with this for a long time, was, how long have I been doing this? How many conversations had I been having with her shadow? With the version of her that looked up and nodded and said, and then went back to the phone? I didn't have a good answer. And the fact that I didn't have a good answer was the answer. It had been a while. The thing that nobody tells you about loving someone who is inconsistently present is that you eventually start editing yourself. You start running a quick internal check before you say something. Is this worth saying? Will she actually be here for this one? Should I save this for a better moment? And at first it's just a filter. A sensible little calibration. You don't unload the heavy stuff when someone's distracted. That's reasonable. That's considerate. But then the filter expands. It starts catching lighter things too. Things you would have said without thinking before. Small observations. Small victories. Things that don't need an audience, but feel hollow when you share them into absence. And one day you realize the filter is running on almost everything. You're editing yourself heavily, pre-censoring yourself, deciding in advance what's worth saying to someone who may or may not actually be there to receive it. And that editing, that constant small self-erasure, is exhausting in a way that doesn't show on the outside. It looks like you're fine. It looks like nothing's changed. But you're working constantly, filtering constantly, deciding constantly whether to show up fully or partially in the space of your own relationship. That's a tax. It levies in silence. And I had been paying it for months without a word. She brought it up herself about 2 weeks after that dinner. Sunday evening. We were on the couch. TV on, neither of us watching it. Can I ask you something, and will you actually answer it? Yeah. Were you pulling back on purpose? Like, deliberately, as a response to how I'd been? I thought about the best way to answer. The honest answer used language that sounds calculated when applied to something as personal as love. But I'd been working, for a while, on not protecting myself through vagueness. Not in a strategic way, I said. But yeah, at some point I stopped overextending because I was running low and it wasn't coming back to me. And I think that changed how I was showing up. She nodded slowly. A real nod. I got lazy, she said. Quiet voice. Looking at the wall. I knew you were solid and I stopped treating that like something I needed to work for. The apartment was quiet enough that I could hear the fridge from across the room. I hate that I needed you to pull back before I noticed, she said. Yeah. I'm sorry. She meant it. I knew the specific sound of her when she meant something. But that apology landed differently than it would have 6 months earlier. 6 months earlier, those 2 words would have poured through me like actual relief. The specific relief of being seen after being invisible for a long time. Of being finally named. That Sunday evening, I received it. I held it. I believed it. But I didn't flood. And that gap, between believing an apology and flooding with relief over it, told me something I didn't know how to explain yet. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because the conversation had been bad. It had actually been more honest than most of what we'd said in months. But I was lying there aware of something. Something had shifted inside me over the past year. Some recalibration had occurred without my noticing. The slow, cellular kind. The kind your body performs without consulting you. The version of me who used to check his phone constantly hoping for her name. Who used to spend mental energy debating whether to follow up. Who used to feel the specific anxiety of not knowing where he stood. That version was quiet. Still there. But much, much quieter. Like a radio that had been playing at low volume for so long you'd stopped hearing it as sound and started hearing it as silence. And I lay there not knowing if that quiet was healing, or if it was damage wearing healing's face. I thought about the year. The number of times I'd taken a breath and given her the benefit of the doubt. The number of times I'd swallowed something uncomfortable and replaced it with patience. The number of times I had told myself she was stressed, she was tired, she was going through something. And those things were all true, they were all real. But they had also become a reason I gave myself to avoid the harder truth, which was, she wasn't treating me the way she should, and I had allowed it. Not passively, actively. Every single time I chose grace instead of clarity, I was actively choosing to absorb something that should have been named, and absorbing it had cost something. Small amounts, each time. Nothing catastrophic. But they had accumulated, quietly, in the dark, the way debt does. And now I was lying in the dark aware of the total. Things genuinely improved after that conversation. I want to say that clearly, because it's true and it matters. She became consistent, present, thoughtful in the way she had been at the start, but applied now to who we'd become. She started initiating texts out of nowhere, plans she'd thought of and suggested, gestures so small they could almost slip past you if you weren't paying attention. A photo of a bookshop window she walked past on her lunch break, just because she thought I'd appreciate it. A voice memo of the first 15 seconds of a song that had come on in the car, with a message, heard this and thought of you immediately, and I don't fully understand why. The kind of thing that costs almost nothing to give and means something disproportionate to its size. The daily texture of caring, which had thinned and then almost disappeared over a year, was back. And I was warm in return. Genuinely warm. Not performing warmth while secretly somewhere else. I was there. I gave her real attention, real engagement, real access to what I was thinking and how I was feeling. But I was also, and this is the honest part, the part that doesn't resolve cleanly, not the same as before. There was something in me now. A small room I'd built during the year. Not a secret room. Not a hiding place. Just a room. One that had a second door I didn't used to have. One that I no longer opened all the way without thinking twice first. Not walls. Not damage. Just something that had formed in the space where I'd had to learn to need less. And I didn't know how to unform it. I wasn't sure it could be unformed from the inside of the thing that had caused it. Her friend Celeste noticed. We were at a birthday dinner for someone in their circle. Noisy restaurant. Long table. The kind of evening where conversations overlap and people keep migrating and nobody keeps track of where they started. Celeste ended up next to me toward the end of the night when the seating had shuffled itself around naturally. She'd known us both from before we were together. She was perceptive in the specific way quiet people often are, saying less than everyone else at a table, seeing more. You're different, she said. Not as an accusation, just an observation. Different how? She considered it. More settled, I think. Less eager. Less available. Is that bad? I'm not sure, she said honestly. I'm just noticing. She looked across the table. You used to track her around rooms, she said. You probably weren't conscious of it, but you'd always know where she was. You'd orient toward her without deciding to. I followed her gaze. Ren was mid-laugh across the table. Lit up. Full. Beautiful. And Celeste was right. I was watching her from a distance that felt new. Not cold. Not absent. Just measured. Observed. There was a glass between me and what I felt. Clean glass. Not dirty. But glass. She's really been putting in the effort, Celeste said. These last few weeks, she's like the old her. I know. But it's not landing the same way. Not a question. No, I said. Not quite. Celeste was quiet for a moment. She needed to almost lose you before she understood what she had, she said. Yeah, that's its own kind of grief for her. I know. But I thought about how to say it. But I don't know what to do with the person I became while she was learning that. Celeste looked at me for a second. Then she said, that's the part no one ever talks about. What it cost the person who kept showing up. She was right. Nobody talks about that part. Because the narrative arc has a clean shape from the outside. Person takes their partner for granted, almost loses them, wakes up, changes. Resolution. What doesn't get told is the story from the other side. What it costs to be the person who kept showing up into a space that wasn't meeting you. What it costs to give grace day after day, week after week. Telling yourself that patience is a virtue and rough patches are normal, and if you just stay consistent the other person will catch up. What those months take out of you. What they leave in their place. The specific irony is this. The thing that protected me. The self-sufficiency I built. The quiet room with the second door. That adaptation was also the thing that made us impossible. I had learned to survive on reduced amounts of her. And once you learn to survive on less, someone offering more isn't automatically the relief it should be. You've already adjusted. You've already recalibrated. You're already standing on different ground. And the person offering more can see that you're standing further away than you used to be, but they can't always tell why the distance has become structural. She asked me directly on a Saturday morning in late winter. Coffee on the table. Good light through the window. Neither of us rushing. Can I ask you something real? Yes. Are you still as in this as you were at the beginning? I looked at her. At the question sitting plainly on her face. At the specific vulnerability of not knowing whether you're loved enough. Of trying to measure someone's feelings through their attention. Of scanning for evidence in the quality of their replies, and whether they reach for you first, and whether their eyes find yours in a crowded room without being asked. I had lived in that exact uncertainty for a year. I knew the precise weight of it. And she was sitting in it now. In the place I had occupied. I'm still in this, I said. But I'm not the same. I protect myself more now. Did I do that? The version of you from 8 months ago did, yeah. She held that. I don't know how to fix it, she said. I'm not sure it's fixable, I said. Not from inside this. Some things are just true now. You can't unlearn a year. She looked out the window. The street was doing its quiet weekend thing. I hate this, she said. I know. I did this. Yeah. And now there's nothing I can do. You're already doing everything you can do, I said. It's not about what you're doing now. It's about what that year taught me. And I can't unteach myself. She cried quietly that morning. Not dramatically. The specific kind of crying that happens when something finally becomes unavoidable. I held her. That part wasn't complicated. The love was still there. Real and clear. But while I held her, something else was also present. I was noticing my own steadiness. The way I was completely there. Not performing presence. Not managing. But also not undone. Not at the edge of anything. Not raw. 2 years earlier, this moment would have cracked me open. Her crying in my arms over what the year had cost us would have reached somewhere very deep. That Saturday morning I felt it. I felt it genuinely. But the floor was different. Further down. And I sat with the quiet guilt of that. The guilt of knowing that what she had done to me, not cruelly, not deliberately, just carelessly, had moved something in me that her subsequent care couldn't fully move back. We stayed together another 3 months. And I want to say again, because it matters for the full truth of this, she was, in those 3 months, the partner she should have been all along. Consistent, present, genuinely thoughtful. She was doing every single thing that had been missing. And I gave back real effort, real attention, real access to myself. I wasn't performing while secretly somewhere else. But I also could not turn off the small, careful, watchful part of me that had formed over a year of learning to be observant. That part didn't turn off. It had become structural. The way a habit becomes structural when you've been building it long enough without noticing. You can love someone and still recognize that the love has taken a shape you didn't choose. That the love is real, but the container has changed into something you didn't plan. And I don't think you can love your way out of that from the inside. Not quickly. Not without time and space you can't always manufacture. The final night wasn't dramatic. April, a Sunday. Show neither of us was actually watching, turned down low. She fell asleep against my shoulder. The room was warm. The building was quiet. And I sat there and thought, very clearly, without anguish, we're not going to make it. Not because she was still the person who'd been half present. She wasn't. Not because there was something broken that couldn't be fixed in theory. But because I had become, quietly and without ceremony, someone who was okay without her. And the thing about becoming okay without someone is that it doesn't go back. You can't unbecome that. It becomes the floor you stand on. And you can love someone from that floor. But building something lasting from it is a different project. One that requires more space and time than we had. We talked it through across a couple of conversations in May. Not one rupture. A series of careful, honest exchanges. The way adults sometimes manage to end things without making them feel like an emergency. She asked if there was anything she could have done differently in those last 3 months. I told her no. Not then. The things that could have changed the outcome were a year earlier. She asked if there was a version where we got back to the beginning. I thought about the person I was at the start. Open in a way I wasn't anymore. Without the second door. I don't think I can be him again, I said. Not with you. Not after what that year taught me. Which was what exactly? That you had to almost lose me before you could see me. She didn't argue. She sat with it. I sat with it. We ended it on a Wednesday. Forgettable weather. She helped me wrap a few things. Books. A jacket. The lamp she'd given me. A birthday gift. A thing she'd picked out specifically because she'd remembered me saying once that I loved that particular warm light, which I genuinely loved. She held the lamp for a second before wrapping it. Keep it, she said. She wrapped it. Set it in the box. I really did love you, she said. Past tense. Not a wound. Just honest. I loved you too, I said. Also past tense. Also the truth. Driving away that night with boxes in the back seat, I thought about the first time she texted me back in under a minute. Early on. Low-stakes message. She'd come back instantly with something that made me laugh out loud alone in the car. And I'd thought, this is someone who shows up. This is someone who pays attention because she wants to. I wasn't wrong. She had been that person. She drifted from it. And then she came back. But by the time she came back, I'd already made peace with her being gone. That's the specific cruelty of timing. The last message she sent was 3 weeks later. Just, I've been thinking. I think you were right about everything. Take care of yourself. I read it 3 times. Thought about what those words would have done to me a year earlier. The sheer relief. The vindication of finally being understood. The specific feeling of being seen after living in someone's peripheral vision. I typed back. You too. Set the phone down. That was that. I've had a lot of time to think about the mechanics of what happened. About the specific way we got here. And what I keep coming back to is this. We had a communication failure that went in both directions. Her failure was in not showing up. In letting the daily effort of choosing someone become something she coasted on instead of something she renewed. In getting comfortable enough with me to stop treating me like someone she could lose. My failure was in not naming it clearly. In choosing the comfort of maintained peace over the discomfort of honest confrontation. In absorbing months of imbalance rather than saying, this is what I need from you, and it isn't happening. We were both operating from a kind of avoidance. Hers was the avoidance of effort, the easy drift into taking for granted. Mine was the avoidance of conflict, the easier path of accommodating rather than risking. And the collision of those two avoidances built a year of slow drift neither of us fully acknowledged while it was happening. That's the part that stays with me. Not the pain of it. The waste. The specific waste of two people who cared about each other genuinely building something unsustainable through entirely avoidable patterns. If she had stayed present, or if I had spoken clearly, or if either of us had caught it earlier and named it, we might have been different. Might. I don't say we would have been, because people are who they are. And the version of her who went passive was a real version of her. And the version of me who absorbed quietly instead of speaking was a real version of me. We weren't performing badly. We were just being exactly ourselves, which is sometimes the most expensive thing you can be. The aftermath is strange, not in a dramatic way, in the quiet way that follows something that has been concluded. You expect the end of a relationship to feel like a loud thing, an event, a before and after, and sometimes it is. But sometimes it feels more like the realization that a sound you'd been hearing for a long time has stopped, and you only notice the silence now that it's permanent. I think about her sometimes, not with ache, with something more like the specific quiet that settles around something real that's finished. I think about the version of me that spent months reaching. I don't resent him. He was doing the only thing that made sense to him at the time. He was trying to love someone all the way he knew how. And when it stopped being returned, he waited. And when waiting didn't work, he adjusted. And the adjustment changed him in ways he didn't choose. That's just what happens. You don't emerge from a long season of inconsistency unchanged. You emerge with a slightly different floor plan. Not a worse one. Not a damaged one. Just different. One that accounts for the possibility that someone you love might go quiet without warning. One that has, built into its architecture, the knowledge that you can survive on less than you thought. That you can find your own warmth when someone else's runs low. That's not a tragedy. That's just information. Expensive information. But information. And I carry it forward now, carefully, towards something that feels warmer. My new building has a working elevator, which sounds like a small thing, but I notice it every single day. I get in, press the button, it takes me where I need to go. No bracing for it to be broken. No automatic preparation for the stairs. No quiet daily management of a thing that might not cooperate. You adjust to unreliability without realizing you've adjusted. It becomes the way things are. You start to build your assumptions around the possibility of disappointment. And then one day you're somewhere that just works. And you realize how much energy you'd been spending on preparation you no longer need. She asked me why I'd gone cold. The honest answer, I learned the cold from you. The truer answer, I learned to live in it. And once you learn to live inside something, it stops being something someone can take from you. That's not a victory. I want to be clear about that. It's not something I'm proud of. It's not a skill I wanted. I would hand it back in a second if I could trade it for the version of me that loved her without that second door. But you don't get to return the things you had to learn in order to keep going. You carry them forward. And you hope the next person you let in meets you while the room with the second door is still warm enough to open all the way. That the next time someone pays the kind of attention she paid at the beginning, they keep paying it. That consistency turns out to be available. That reaching is something that happens from both directions at once. I don't know yet. There's one more thing I want to say about all of this. About the specific experience of being on the other side of someone's growth. Because what happened in those final months, those 3 months where she was fully present, fully trying, was something I hadn't expected to feel the way I felt it. I expected relief. I expected to feel found. I expected the return of her effort to restore something. And it did restore things. Genuinely. The warmth was real. The ease between us came back in pieces. Some nights it felt the way it used to feel, before month 7, before the drift. Some nights I thought, maybe this is what change looks like. Maybe this is repair. But I was also, underneath those moments, always slightly waiting. Not consciously. Not deliberately. Just the way you are when you've been surprised before. When something has changed without warning once, your body doesn't automatically believe it won't change without warning again. That's not a choice. That's just the body being honest about its history. And that waiting, that residual bracing, I couldn't turn it off. Even when everything in front of me said, she's changed. Even when the evidence was clear and consistent. Some part of me had moved to a permanent state of light readiness. And you can love someone from that state. I did. But it's a different kind of loving. More like watching something beautiful through a window. You can appreciate it fully. You can feel how much it matters. But you're always slightly aware of the glass. I think about what I wish had happened differently. Not in a useless, backward-facing way. Just the honest accounting. I wish I had said something earlier. Not hinted. Not dipped a toe in and retreated when she offered a reasonable explanation. Said it. Said, I've been feeling like I'm reaching for you, and you aren't reaching back. That's been true for months now, and I needed to change. That conversation, the direct version, the one I didn't have, might have changed everything. Or it might have revealed that what she was doing reflected something more fundamental about how she prioritized me when things were comfortable. Either way, I would have known sooner. Either way, I wouldn't have spent a year absorbing something I should have named. That's what I carry forward. Not bitterness toward her. Not a rule about never showing up too fully for someone. Just the knowledge that clarity is a kindness. To them, yes, but also to yourself. The moment you name something, the moment you say out loud, this isn't working for me, you stop being a passive recipient of someone else's choices. You become an active participant in your own story. I was a passive recipient for too long. Never again. I'm still carrying the things I learned, but I'm carrying them a little lighter than I used to. And I think, slowly, in the ordinary way things change when you're not watching for them. The second door is starting to feel less like protection and more like just a door. Something you can open. If the right person is on the other side.